Insomnia is a thriller starring Al Pacino and Robin Williams about a veteran detective investigating a murder in Alaska. Let's take an in-depth look at what is arguably Christopher Nolan's most overlooked film. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
It's all about the small stuff.
That's the line you went with. I think I had an F-bomb in it, admittedly.
Yeah.
But there was a line about "you're as mysterious to me as a block toilet is to an effing plumber," which I thought was the quote of the movie.
It was a whole monologue, but you're right. The best line out of it dropped some serious F-bombs, so...
Yeah, okay. Well, this is a movie podcast, everyone. Welcome to the show. We are working through the films of Christopher Nolan after a slight tangent into animated Turtles movies.
Tiny little detour into something pretty much the same, all things considered.
But we're back now for the other half of Nolan season, and we're here to talk about Insomnia. Obviously, we had to do Oppenheimer when it was new, and us from the future, I'm sure we liked it, maybe? I don't know.
I thought it was incredible.
Possibly.
Or awful. One of them.
But Insomnia was Nolan's third movie, his second kind of bigger film after Memento, the one that he did right before Batman Begins. So it's kind of this notable stepping stone film where, you know, he went from, yeah, sure, we know who Guy Pearce is and there's some other notable actors in Memento, but he then did a film with Al Pacino, you know, the guy from like The Godfather. So it does feel like he kind of went up a rung on the ladder, as it were.
Yeah, for me, this one felt like the proving grounds. Like Memento was his big get his foot in the door thing, and this one's like, all right, but can you like do just a normal movie without the gimmicks?
Which is funny because I actually think that's one of the things that I was thinking about this is that this is definitely, with the exception of maybe his Batman movies because they're Batman movies, this is his most normal film.
Yes.
You know, it's and it is a remake of I want to say Swedish, maybe Norwegian, it's a Scandinavian film.
Was this one not in Sweden? I watched the Swedish one.
Very funny.
Oh no.
Yes, very funny. You watched the one with Stellan Skarsgård. Yes,
I did.
No, so this is a remake. It's a thriller. It's you know, there's a murder, and Al Pacino plays this cop who goes from LA to Alaska to help out with the case. But the story is really about kind of his ongoing personal stuff that's kind of building up and sort of teased throughout the film. Robin Williams notably plays the killer. That's not a spoiler. You know, he is introduced basically as the killer in this.
I'm glad that's not a spoiler because I was going to have a real hard time talking around it.
No, I mean, even when it was being marketed, it was like, hey, Robin Williams is playing a bad guy. You know, that was very much part of the thing. So, and you know, this was notable. You know, he did this, and then I think 1 Hour Photo was maybe a couple of years after.
Same year.
Same
actually.
year, okay.
Yep.
So he really wanted to do something different, and it was kind of like, it was propped up a long time as like, hey, sometimes these comedic actors are really good at doing dramatic stuff, and I've heard from various directors and stuff over the years that part of the reason for that is because comedy is actually the harder of the two. So whenever a comedian tries to do this, they end up being often very good at it, and that's kind of what we have here. So
yeah, no, I mean, I've starred in numerous like drama sort of short films and student films and stuff like that, but as you can tell by however many episodes we've done of this, no funniness is to be found. No comedy exists here.
Yeah, I'll leave it there basically, but it's, you know, Hilary Swank's in there as well.
Which is it weird to me that because Hilary Swank is in this, like out of everything in the movie, including Robin Williams, Hilary Swank's existence is the thing that dates it the most for me.
Robin Williams is literally dead.
I know, and that's what was so strange. Like, Robin Williams popped up, I'm like, this movie could take place any place in like 30 years, but Hilary Swank shows up, and I'm like, this is either late 90s or early 2000s. Very narrow bar there.
She's done stuff since then, surely?
Surely, but name something. I prove my point.
I'm trying really hard to think of something that Hilary Swank's done in the last 10 years, and it's It's a struggle. It is a struggle. Hold on. All right, I'm not cheating, but hold on.
All right. Anything post 2010, I'll give you.
Okay, I am looking, but I'm seeing if there's anything I actually recognize from this time period.
Not for me. Not counting a voice in BoJack Horseman. That doesn't count. Because I don't think I would have recognized her.
I'm using this. She's in a TV show called Alaska Daily, like right now.
Yeah, there you go.
Which
maybe it's just picking up her character's arc from here.
Yeah. Honestly, the last movie here that I think I recognize is I've never seen, but I vaguely remember The Reaping existing from 2007.
Okay, I remember P.S. I Love You coming out just because I always thought it was a dumb title. That's all I got. But either way, do you understand my point though? That's what dates the movie.
I get what you're saying. Yeah. So, so this is a murder. It's not even a murder mystery. Again, like the murder case is not it's a character story, right? That just happens to revolve around the investigation of a murder. And that's what it is. And it's set in Alaska during the summer. Well, I assume it's the summer, where it's daylight the entire time. You know, they go months without any night. And they point out in the winter it's the opposite, where they have nighttime for 4
That's
months.
when the vampires come out.
Yes. So, you know, and it deals with, obviously it's called Insomnia. The lead character that Pacino plays, Will Dormer, he has trouble sleeping when he's in Alaska and there's no darkness. That's that's the kind of the thematic thing, but obviously there's more to it. We'll get into it. We'll start spoiler free as we always do, and we'll get into stuff. So yeah, so much like Memento, this was one that I went back and watched after Batman Begins in 2005. So that is definitely I can pinpoint almost exactly within a couple months.
Okay.
You know, when I saw it. So I assume you'd seen this before.
So I definitely at some point had it on, but I don't think I was really paying that much attention to it at the time because pretty much everything in this movie seemed fresh.
Okay.
So I'd take that for what you will. I'd had the same situation as you, except it wasn't for Batman Begins, it was for Dark Knight, where I went back and watched through a bunch of Nolan's stuff, and this one was on the list, but I just don't remember any of it. So yeah.
Well, with that said, though, there's one question that we always start off with: is how did you feel about Insomnia?
So, I liked it in terms of it was a very well done story. It was a decently good looking movie, but I think in terms of Nolan movie, this one stands out as the black sheep even more than something like Following, where this one feels so just like every other movie. Like there's not that little extra special pop to it of him playing with the format or getting weird with any of the different elements in it. It just feels like a dry run for can we trust you with the keys to Batman? And in that regard, it's fine. It works. It's a decently made movie. It just doesn't have that extra little Nolan spark, I guess, is the issue I'm having here.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely his most normal movie. It's definitely one where, even the fact that it's got a source material. I mean, not that he's not necessarily adapted other things, but you know what I mean. Even the fact that it's effectively a remake of another movie,
right?
Certainly paints it in a different light than almost everything else that he has done, with maybe the exception of Dunkirk, because that's based on a real event.
Well, we'll see with Oppenheimer as well.
Yes,
same thing.
We did see with Oppenheimer.
We did, and it was great awful.
But no, I think I like the movie a lot, and I think it's really it does everything it's setting out to do very well, and I do love how it looks. I like the score. I like the use of the Alaskan, vistas and all that stuff.
It looked very similar. Like the opening shots of this movie are just tons of landscape shots. And I feel like that's the point where he's like, I'm going to put something in Batman here. When I get my hands on that series, it's going to look just like this.
And I think the performances from Pacino and Williams are both very good. I think the core arc of the story has a reasonable bit of heart to it, because I've seen the original Insomnia as well, and I remember
Okay.
when I saw that, and I saw that later. I remembered thinking when I watched that it was a lot colder, not just like literally, like it was a cold climate, but it was a bit colder in that it was less. There's a redemptive quality to this film, which I think isn't in that original film. And maybe if I'd saw the original film first, I'd feel like, oh, this softened it rather than that one feels colder. But I do think I prefer this one, perhaps because of that. So,
okay.
I like it a lot. I think it's overlooked, even though watching it now is very clear. It's Nolan doing a more typical Hollywood movie, but I do think it is a very good example of all the things that it's doing, and has enough like unique elements to the character and the play between the hero and the villain and like what it's about. I think there's enough layers there that there's enough going on that it never feels like it is just a shallow Hollywood thriller. It feels more than that, but it never feels like a Christopher Nolan idea. It never feels like that.
There was the only major criticism I can lob against it in terms of it's not Nolan, just ignoring that. I think that the main driving force of this movie, as we come to find out, and is basically the pitch of the movie, is that Al Pacino is trying to solve this crime, but he cannot get to sleep. He is forced awake for like the entire time he's doing this. I don't think the movie did a really good job of selling the tiredness to the audience. I think it could have been done more through the camera lens rather than through the acting. There was only one point towards the very end of this film where he just focuses in a trance on some windshield wipers. And that's the only time I feel like the audience is kind of let in on just how tired he is. I think the movie would have been a lot better if we had spent the entire time just like maybe slowly getting things of missed time or hallucinations or anything like that, where it is just little things that grow worse and worse as he stays up longer and longer.
Yeah. That said, though, I did buy from the performance that Pacino was very tired, especially in the back like third of the movie. Like he looks like a wreck.
At the end of the movie, they at one point they go out to a bar for drinks, and I have never seen a man look just as dead as Pacino does in that shot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So no, it's like I think all that stuff is really solid. Yeah, I think there's character dynamics here. Like there's like what Hilary Swank's character, who's the young sort of passioned
the rookie
cop, but who's passioned and who wants to do good and has got the heart of gold effectively, and like how she fits into the themes of the story is actually quite good. I think when you actually start talking about the intricacies of that and how she relates to Pacino's character, and then there's obviously a lot of parallels that the movie has between Pacino and Robin Williams, even though they're on the opposite sides. Like, and some of them are almost like forced by Williams' character, but which aren't really real. And then there's some that are true, that are there, that are more subtle and there for the audience to discover and find out. So, I think all that's quite good.
Yeah, the one thing that popped in my mind at one point is The Departed, just because it is this movie pretty early on has the characters meet up. It isn't with most thrillers, it's the sort of thing of the one comparison that came to mind was Seven, where it's the back end of the movie and then we get revealed, oh, here is the killer. But because Robin Williams is so prominently featured, it's earlier on than I think anyone in the audience expects it to be.
I don't think it's as early as you think it is.
No, it's like halfway through the movie.
Yeah, it's almost an hour into the movie, actually, before you see him.
In terms of the pacing of the plot, it doesn't happen where you think it would. It happens like before that point. And once we get to that part where they are able to start discussing things and getting to know like how each other ticks, that's where I started getting these Departed vibes, where it's two different sides of the law, but each person has their own special, like, not special, their own thing that is shared between them.
Yeah, I honestly, it's an interesting one to dissect because it is clearly this like more conventional movie, but with a director who's obviously got talent beyond the typical director you get for this type of film.
It would be like if David Lynch showed up for Expendables 4. It'd be like, what in the hell is he even going to do here?
You could say it's like David Lynch doing Dune, if you really want to do an accurate,
True.
This really happened example.
Yeah. I still consider that to be more Lynchian than it needed to be, but yeah.
But not as Lynchian as it should have been.
True. Very true.
Yeah, I think that's what makes this interesting, is that I think Nolan's sensibilities, like I understand why they hired him for this, because I do think a lot of what he does translates well into this type of movie, even if it's not got the more unique elements that we typically think of when it comes to Christopher Nolan. But it's funny that at this point in his career, like Following was this super indie like thing that no one had seen. Memento was a hit, but this and then Batman Begins, and obviously Batman, just because it's a Batman movie, is ultimately more conventional. Yeah, it plays with some timeline stuff a little bit, but it's nothing compared to like his more experimental films. It's notable that after this and Batman Begins, he wanted to do Prestige before he went back to Batman, which is probably one of the most. It's like he had all this built up, pent up. Like, I need to play with time and structure.
I don't know for sure, but I feel like that's the sort of thing where he went in and pitched Inception, and they're like, "Nah, that's too weird." And then he was like, "Okay, I'll tone it back a little bit," and then we got Prestige out of it.
But then he did Dark Knight, and it was like, "Okay, you can make whatever you want, Chris. Go make Inception." Yeah,
I'm gonna go find love out in space.
So, no, I think it's a really tight movie, and I think it gets overlooked probably more than it deserves to be overlooked. Like, I think it gets talked about only as, it's one of Nolan's early films before he kind of hit it super big. And it's good that it has that, because it means people do discover it and people find it because it's him and because it's tied to him. But it is almost a shame that it's never kind of just appreciated for its own merits. And in the same way that a Memento is, where it's like, it's an Nolan film, but it's worth seeing Memento because it's Memento. It's great.
Right. I think it's because it is lacking that sort of gimmick to it. It doesn't have that little extra something that is selling it. Like, the only thing I could theoretically say is, okay, this movie is set and it's always daytime. That is the gimmick, quote unquote, of the movie. But in terms of the plot, in the end, it really doesn't matter that it's always daytime here. It just so happens to be always daytime, and it almost instigates the plot a little bit, but by the end, it's just a non-factor.
It's not a non-factor. I think that's a bit dismissive. I think it's more thematic than it is a plot point. It's not.
Oh yeah,
it's not something that it's using to drive anything really, other than just being kind of symbolic. And it's kind of, the idea that, all the dirty truth comes out in the harsh light of day. Like, he can't hide from it. He can't hide in the darkness from any of the truths that he's feeling guilty about, Like, that's, it's all thematic. It's all kind of that. It does, there's a nice little joke early on in the film, though, where he's like, let's go to the school and question the boyfriend. And like, okay, sounds good. He's like, let's go now. And they're like, it's 10 o'clock. He's like, yeah, great. He's like, at night. And he's like, okay.
All right, not used to that one yet.
Well, it's just, I think what's really neat about that is obviously he's this detective who like notices a lot of details, and he's like seeing things, and he's bringing up all these good questions. But it's kind of funny that he misses this big, the big picture of like, it's actually nighttime. You just don't realize it. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it was, and that was really the first time that it's mentioned at all. We don't see the time as he's flying in. We don't see the time as he's going through a couple, like, I think he goes to the morgue first to look at the body. So all of that time, it's just a normal work day for him. And then all of a sudden, sir, it's going on midnight. We might want to call it.
And I think it's also a little disorientating to the viewer, because they don't actually specify the time that much in the movie, so sometimes it's actually hard to tell, or like you're not really aware of what time it is at any given point. Like, sometimes the reference is the morning or whatever because it's breakfast, but there are lots of times where you sort of like take a minute to realize, this is probably the middle of the night, even though no one's ever saying that.
And I do think that that's something that almost works to the movie's detriment, is that we occasionally get a check-in of how many full days it's been. And we do have sequences of him trying to sleep in his hotel room where he's just getting more and more desperate to get just a little bit of shut-eye. but I don't think that it ever really sells this guy has been awake for this long. It never quite hits that hard. We see it through the acting, but in terms of the actual plot and what characters are saying, it just is kind of, it's been a few days. It's always just been a few days. I feel like if it had said like you have gone 5 full days without sleep at any point here, I would have been like, damn, that is a really long time. But instead it's just passed off every once in a while of like, oh yeah, you got here 6 days ago. And it's like, oh, okay, that's been a while, but it's never given with that punch of you've been awake for that long.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it can't. I don't know, Robin Williams does bring it up a couple times, and that kind of emphasizes that. I think that the whole idea of the it's always daytime and you kind of lose track of how much time has passed. I think the purpose of that, to play devil's advocate, even though I'm not necessarily disagreeing with what you just said,
Right.
is that it is all supposed to sort of, like, for him it's all kind of blurring together, like, because he is so tired, like the passage of time is becoming kind of meaningless, and it all is all just kind of a blur. And I think that's kind of what it's going for, is the, like, you know, when Robin Williams points out later in the film, like, hey, if you get to midnight on day 6, you've beat my record. Like, you know, he says that at one point. And I think that's a surprise to the characters as it is to the audience, that, oh wait, it's been, like, I'm almost at that long. Like, that's like, and I'm someone who often, like, has a terrible sleeping schedule. I'm someone who often has pulled an all-nighter, and I've been up for maybe like 30 plus hours straight, right? And when you get to that point, like, I know how that feels. So imagining that stretched out to day 6 is astronomical. Like, I feel horrible at that amount of time. I know it's not something I try and do that much. Occasionally I still get myself into these, like, annoying things where I've got something I need to do at a certain time and I've not been able to get to sleep and I just need to stay up, and then, you know, I'll feel a bit shit, and that'll be it, and I'll whatever. But this is like, try to imagine this is like Nancy and Nightmare on Elm Street by the time we get to the end of the movie. It's been like a week without sleep. And
I think that's the thing. Like, even going back to Nightmare on Elm Street, you get this feeling just in how the story is told, how it is shot, of how long it's been. But this one, it's only through dialogue and Al Pacino's acting that I really feel that he's tired. I kind of wish that the way that the movie was shot, or the way that, like, scenes are structured, also represented that level of insomnia. I feel the character is tired, but I don't feel that that's put onto the audience at all. And that's my only real criticism in terms of the, like, if the fact that he's tired is such a major plot point in this movie, it is kind of the central focus here, is that insomnia, I think that the audience should have been more subjected to that than they were, of questioning, like, I mean, it is, at the beginning of the movie, a murder mystery, more or less. He's trying to gather facts. He's trying to outwit his opponent here. But every time we get a fact, every time we get any sort of new evidence, it's never questioned. It's never questioned, is this real? Did this actually happen? And I think that it's perfectly right up Nolan's alley to have that. It's, as we said numerous times in the Memento review, questioning which evidence is real because of a memory thing. Your memory starts going when you're tired. Your perception starts going when you're tired. And I think that this movie would have been helped incredibly by that.
It's interesting because, like, that does change it so much, though, and I have to question, like, you know, why was the choice made to do it this way? You know, to not, like, try and play tricks in the audience, to not try and pass off the insomnia to them. Because the movie's much more concerned about why he can't sleep than it is about the effects of not sleeping, right? And I do like that part of it a lot. So I guess, like, on some level, Nolan has made a choice that the audience is more like one of is you know, it's more that we're more like Hilary Swank or Maura Tierney, who works at the hotel. Like, we're these outsiders witnessing this man as opposed to being in his shoes. And I would say that maybe the point of that is that part of this movie is that at a certain point he wants, like, honest opinion on his character. He wants to be judged. I won't go into it too much. And I do wonder if that's part of the idea, is that this is not meant to be relatable. This is meant to be about us judging him as a person. And therefore, he is keeping us that sort of third, we're in the third person to him rather than being first person POV kind of style.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with that, and I think that that's a valid way to go through it. My only critique in that is that the kind of big moment where he reveals why he wants to be judged and like goes through all that, it's kept a mystery for the entire movie. We know it's there. We know that something is there on whether or not he needs to be judged, but it's left up to the, like, it's completely not even revealed to the audience until way, way, way late in the movie. So I think you're still playing with that idea of, well, is this true? Is this not true? It's just done through dialogue rather than through the way the movie feels.
What was being played as true or not true exactly?
I mean, I can't really get into it.
Oh, okay, sure.
That much, but the fact of, in the very beginning of the movie, he says he's being investigated by internal affairs.
Well,
and the question is,
but that's
why?
But this is why I said that though. Is I don't necessarily agree that the movie's trying to make you think, did this or did this not happen. I think it's pretty clear from early on that at least something did happen. Like, there's clearly something to this. It's not just
see for me, that I didn't get that. I got it. He's the way that in the opening scenes he was talking to his partner, who we haven't even mentioned yet. His partner is Hap, played by Martin Donovan. He's talking to Hap and he's basically saying, like, the internal affairs, they have a knack for messing stuff up. And his partner comes back and is like, you're a good cop, though. You don't have to worry about that. And Al Pacino says, yeah, I am a good cop. Like, everything points to the fact of nothing is really there, but we still keep on bringing up over and over again that internal affairs is investigating him, but we never get the reason why until the very end.
I don't think that's a problem, though. I think the fact that he is constantly thinking about it tells you there's something there and that it's coming. Like, the whole idea of following him and...
Okay.
I think that's a completely fair way to like tee it up and then leave it for later. And as it's playing out, I don't think we need to know exactly the specifics. And I think that's why when it comes to a point later on when he gets to like almost the relief of being able to just confess it, because like he makes a choice to just talk about it, and it feels like a big character moment for him to talk about it. And I think that's the point. It feels like he's finally, like it's almost like he might be able to finally go to sleep if he does this.
But even then, one of the few things that they do in this movie that I think should have been expanded upon is that there's little half-second shots to things that are seemingly going through his mind as he's getting more and more tired. And at the very beginning of the movie, we see what turns out to be glimpses of this confession he makes. And it's very tiny shots. You can't even tell what's going on. But it is glimpses of this. I think that that's the sort of thing that it could have been expanded upon. It could have been, if we played up this mystery even more through how the movie was shot, how it was structured. Instead, what we got was this beginning part where he says he's a totally good cop, and then he is basically a good cop the entire time throughout the movie, save for one event, which I think is a spoiler, so I can't quite get into that yet, but he's a good cop pretty much throughout the movie, and then it's only at the very end do we get this shift over to, oh, here's what that event was that is, it seems like it's trying to make you refocus on everything he did up to this point, but I didn't get that, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think it's...
Maybe I'm just getting a completely different reading of this movie because I know that it's Nolan, and I was kind of just waiting for that other shoe to drop the whole time.
No, I
was just waiting for that, like, oh, here's the thing that recontextualizes everything.
No, yeah, I think you are bringing that into this, and I think you're being a little unfair with how it handles its key character story by like expecting more from Nolan.
No, that's fair.
As opposed, because I think this is the part that I think is almost ironclad, to be honest, throughout the movie.
Okay.
Is like setting up of who he is, what he might have done in the past, and like how he's feeling about that and how that ties into everything that's going on in the present day case. Like that's, to me, that's like the spine of the movie. That's what makes it all work. That's what makes it all click. So, you know, I didn't feel a shift later on because I felt like it was a natural, you know, this is obviously what it was always going to build to, was kind of this kind of, you know, moment. So I don't know, I didn't feel that disjointedness with that in particular. I think, you know, where it maybe, you know, it's such a weird thing to come to a movie and say, oh, it's more normal and therefore like it, because this is not my least favorite Nolan film. In fact, it's not even my second least favorite Nolan film, I don't think. So I still really quite like it, even though it definitely is a more conventional movie by Nolan's typical status quo.
I enjoyed it. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it. It just seemed to me like there was some stuff that was set up that didn't get as much of a payoff as I feel it could have, is I guess my main complaint there. Like the whole thing I was saying with him being tired, it feels like they set up a really interesting way to show that he was tired with these tiny little flashes of things in his mind. But then we never quite got that to the extent that I think it should have gone to. Yeah,
I mean, I think that's a separate thing from what you were talking about before, with his backstory and stuff. I think ultimately it's very hard to sort of give it any kind of objective, like how much is correct. Like, because at a certain point you're doing a very different movie where you're wanting the because the way you were talking, it was like you want the audience to constantly question like what we're seeing is true. You know, is this unreliable because he's tired? But clearly that was never the intention, because I think if Nolan wanted to do that, I think he would have done a lot better than what is here on that particular.
Through Memento, he's proven he knows how to get into that mindset.
So, and maybe that's why. Maybe he didn't want to just do that again, because he just done Memento. He wanted to do something a little bit different, which is why I think this is less of a, you know, like I say, more of a third person viewpoint to the character than it is that first person thing. But it's, you know, it's I feel like at a certain point though you kind of start criticizing a movie for what it's not, but there's nothing wrong with what it actually does, so it feels a little weird to me to be like, oh, but it's not these other things, so therefore
as soon as I brought up the thing of maybe I'm just bringing in my expectations of Nolan along with it, I'm willing to concede the point. Like, that's pretty much what I'm doing here. And it is an issue to be the lowest or most regular movie, because I know you say it's not your least favorite, but it's the most regular movie in a outstanding and very messing with the format director.
And I know everyone's wondering what is the least favorite movie. Don't worry, we've got Dunkirk to come.
I haven't seen it, so we'll see how low it rates for me.
Do you know what's so funny is that I've heard this complaint about Inception, about his Batman films, that Nolan's too cold a storyteller, where you don't feel the heart of the characters. And I've always disagreed with that heavily. Like, I always feel like, no, there is a heart to all these characters. I see the arcs. I feel connected to them. In this case, it's a story of this guy who's maybe done something bad, and there's a redemption kind of angle by the end. But to me, Dunkirk's the one where I felt nothing for anyone. That's the one that felt cold to me. And people will probably think I'm crazy for saying that, because it's based on a real event where lots of people were dying. But that's not enough. You have to actually give me characters. But I mean, that's something to talk about when we get to Dunkirk, which I've only seen once.
We'll get there.
But you know,
that's 2 weeks away.
Yeah,
I believe.
2 weeks away. Yeah. So, whereas, you know, I think this does have that core like character arc that makes it work. That makes it go like you understand why he's doing what he's doing, or at least you've got enough to sort of speculate why he's doing what he's doing. And then it sort of comes into shape as it goes. I think that's true for all of his other films in different ways as well, because Memento obviously is a very, you know, distinct, very experimental movie in how it actually progresses the character story, but it does have that thing where there is an arc. You do find out things, and yeah.
I mean, I think that I agree. I think that the characters are written in a way that they do have this heart to them. You understand their motives, their goals, who they are as people. But I think even if this movie failed on that front, Al Pacino and Robin Williams were gonna bring it. Like they were great in their roles here.
Yeah, no, they're both really good, obviously. given the movie a lot of weight. I think the cinematography, and because it's got all these interesting locales with the, like the foggy like riverbank or whatever it is, and stuff like that. Like, there's a lot of good visuals in the movie, and then on top of that, you've got a supporting cast that are pretty solid. Hilary Swank's perfectly fine.
There's an entire, I want to say C or D list of like cops that we only kind of barely know the whole time, but they're good. They're fine, save for the one guy who makes a really weird joke at the end. But he's the only one I have a criticism.
The one who likes blowjobs?
Yeah. Because I mean, if we're just getting to that point, out of nowhere, he just says like, hey, who has two thumbs and likes blowjobs? This guy. And they just left it in the movie.
I think it's showing that this small Alaskan town is, this is a joke from 20 years ago that he thinks is funny.
Yeah. I was going to say, humor must move slower up there because, dear Lord, man.
Yeah. Well, no, I think what's good about the ensemble cast of like locals is that they do feel like a sort of unit, whereas, Pacino is this newcomer. He's the outsider who comes in, and he feels different to the rest of them. So it nails that feeling quite well.
Oh, yeah.
Also, one of the points that the movie kind of brings up a couple times is that there's like two types of people in Alaska. There's the people who were born there, and there's the people who moved there to like escape from whatever their life was before. Which, not doesn't even mean anything dramatic necessarily. Obviously, it could be someone on the run for murder, but it could also just be, life sucked and they came here to like, to keep to themselves, right? And I think you even see that distinction between some of the locals, and then like, the cops who just feel that they've all just grown up here and they're, except the one guy who knew Pacino beforehand, who obviously transferred here at some point. So, no.
The only other people I would want to point out here are there are two teenage actors.
Oh, one of them is very well known actually. Catherine Isabelle is a scream queen of sorts because she was in Ginger Snap. She went on to be in Freddy vs. Jason, and even later on she did stuff like American Mary, and she was in the Hannibal TV show for a bit. So she's known amongst horror fans quite well actually. So I remember even at the time seeing this, going, "Oh hey, it's Ginger from Ginger Snaps."
And then the other one is Randy, who is played by Jonathan Jackson, who I'm only kind of familiar with, but apparently he was a big dude on General Hospital, the soap opera.
Oh, really? Okay.
He has nearly 400 episodes logged in that. So
I did not recognize him or know him from anything, but yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Yep.
So yeah.
But I thought that they were both good. It's hard to get a teenage actor because it's either they're going to come off as good or they're going to come off as like whiny and angsty for no reason. These characters were both whiny and angsty, but it felt like they had good reason to be. It felt like they were real characters the whole time. So kudos on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, if it wasn't clear, I definitely recommend checking Insomnia out if you haven't.
For sure.
There's a lot of, there's a lot of good quality to it. There's a lot of great character work in it. It's just not as distinct and unique as a lot of other Nolan films, but that by no means makes it like lesser, in terms of like being worth watching. Obviously most people probably don't rank it very high in his filmography, but like I say, there's at least one that I would rank lower, significantly, because I just outright don't like Dunkirk that much. So
you just wait till we get there and we'll be like, this movie touched me in a way.
I hope the second viewing makes me see something like that I didn't before. It makes me feel something.
Okay.
I really hope it does. Okay, so I'll give the spoiler warning then for Insomnia, and we can get into it. So the movie, as you said, opens up with a guy that, as the titles are playing out, there's these little hints of like the backstory, but we quite quickly go into
the opening of Twin Peaks.
Actually, I thought of Twin Peaks more later on when all the logs were on the water.
That too.
That was more Twin Peaks to me. The flying over the ice didn't make me think of Twin Peaks.
Well, I wasn't saying the flying. I was saying the fact we have a detective coming into town to investigate a teen girl's murder of a bunch of small town locals. That seemed pretty Twin Peaks.
Hey, if Twin Peaks characters started popping up in this Alaskan town, I would have probably popped hard. Not back then, because I hadn't watched Twin Peaks when I first saw this, but now I'd
You'd
be
be like,
excited.
why is that lady talking to a log? I don't get it.
Yeah, so we meet Hilary Swank, and she's this very very eager cop. She knows Pacino's character very well. She did a case study on one of his cases at the academy, and he's a little flattered by it. She's bringing up details, and
I do think this scene is very good because it's kind of the first we're getting of any of these characters, and it immediately sets up the dynamic of this is a really good cop. Like he's well known even in Alaska, and this is a very eager fangirl of his.
Yes, which actually sets up one of the parallels to Robin Williams' character just right off the bat here, because the murder victim, Kay, it turns out she was a fan of Robin, because Robin Williams' character is a writer. He writes detective novels, it turns out. And she ended up getting to know him because she met him at a book convention or whatever it was, a book signing maybe.
Yep.
And they drummed up a relationship of sorts, and she was this protege for him that he was kind of becoming attracted to. And obviously, ultimately, it went dark places. We'll get into that as we go. I do think it's interesting for the polarity between Pacino and Williams that he has this fangirl character who is here to admire his police work, who props him up on a pedestal, who wants to listen. And there's a few nice little jokes actually of like he says something kind of wise about police work, and he sort of jokes, write that down. And then she sort of like goes to actually write it down, and then sort of realizes he's joking. But there's a little bit of heart there. There's a little bit of a camaraderie that kind of forms.
That's still on day one when he's able to cognizantly make jokes.
He makes at least one joke in day two, I think. But it doesn't last long. Yes, he starts to break down a bit after that. But I think that's one of the big parallels early on, and I think actually the heart of the film, in many ways, is how he views Hilary Swank's character and how he kind of like tries to effectively preserve who she is by the end of the story.
Well, I think the big selling point of the movie is how much is it worth keeping to your morals? How much is it worth keeping that high moral ground as a person? And some people find the reason to sell out. Some people find that point where it's like, no, it's worth degrading your morals in this case. But I think that the point the movie's trying to make by the end is like, it's never really worth it. It's always worth keeping your morality in check.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a slight tinge of grey to it, because we'll get to it when we get to like what the backstory is, but there's definitely not as clean cut as just a cop went dirty because he started taking payoffs. Like, it's not like that at all. There's a lot. It's a lot. There's definitely like a genuine good intention of like what we find out about him.
Like Al Pacino is definitely a good cop. It's just other issues.
Yeah. So we're introduced to these characters. The partner Hap is a lot more kind of quiet and stern, one would say. Yep. But it introduces here that like they've got some IA problems back in LA where they're coming hard down in their department, and that's sort of mentioned a few times. And it's made clear though when they come at the police station, the guy who runs this precinct, like this is someone that he knows from the past. He's like, hey, it's been 7 years, whatever. And it's like, yeah, it's a small town. I didn't think they'd actually send you. So there's kind of an implication that they sent them here. Like, it wasn't like maybe the normal thing to do, but because they were like almost being investigated, it was like, oh, let's ship them off to Alaska, and that'll buy some time. Maybe things will cool over. It
sounds like Internal Affairs was pushing down hard, and the captain's like, I hate Internal Affairs just as much as you do. How about you get out of here for a while? Just go up north.
So he's like, things are simple here, and he throws there's like a note from IA about him, and he throws it in the trash, and he's like, no, things are simple here. Let's catch the bad guy. Let's do the thing. And I think that question of like, are things black and white? Are there shades of grey? I think that's a big thing that plays in this movie as well as we go forward, because this is effectively this captain saying, no, it's black and white. It's simple here, so we're going to keep it simple. Let's catch the killer, and it's that's all it is.
And then immediately it stops being simple.
They go to the morgue, and he notices a bunch of details, like her nails were clipped and her hair was washed after she was killed, things like that. So these are details, and that tells them this is someone who cared about her. This is someone who knows her. This is not just a random like attack of someone, a stranger.
Yeah, it's also someone who he did this. He committed this heinous crime, and he still had the wherewithal to do these tender, loving things rather than freaking out and trying to just get rid of the body.
Yeah, it's a key point here that he's like, this might have been his first time doing this, but it won't be his last if we don't stop him, because he clearly did this like a pro.
Yeah. The line was he crossed the line and didn't even blink.
So that sets up that, and then they go to her house and search her room. It's like the idea is, okay, if it's someone she knew, there'll be clues as to who it was. There'll be something we could find. And there's a bunch of things they find here. The main things that pop up, though, are like an expensive dress and a bit of jewelry that no one could have... Because he's like, hey, she got a boyfriend. It's like, yeah, could he have afforded this? He's in high school. Like, no.
And when you meet the kid, like, yeah, there's no way he ever would.
No way.
The other major piece of evidence is there is a photo on her desk of her and her best friend that has been torn right down the middle. So immediately he takes note of that and it's just like, we're going to be questioning her.
Yes, the werewolf of the movie, Ginger. So yes, yeah. And then this is where the joke happens of like the time and him wanting to go to this, because he wants to make a show of it and get people talking. So he wants to pull him out of class. You know, he wants to pull the boyfriend out of class and all that. But we go to the hotel, and Maura Tierney's there. She's running the hotel. They go for food, and this is where the conversation of like the IA stuff comes up. And Hap's like, look, I think I need to cut a deal. They're coming after me hard. And Pacino, you know, he's like that doesn't sound like a good idea. Like I've put a lot of bad people away, and how many of them are going to suddenly be allowed to like have their cases thrown out and walk because my judgment, my ethics,
my testimony,
are called into question. Is it really worth that? But it is, like you said, though, there is a point here where he does say, I'm a good cop. And I think, the performance is good, because I believe that he believes that when he says it. Like, whether or not we find out something that makes me question that later, it does seem like he believes it when he says it. So I'm like, okay, if he did do something, it feels like, okay, something might have been done for a reason, but it doesn't seem like you're just some dirty cop running around doing whatever you want with no consequence.
Yeah. Especially because when it comes down to Hap, he pretty much openly admits, like, look, they've got me. I am a dirty cop. I recognize that. And so when he says you're a good cop, you believe it just that little bit more, because he's telling him, like, yeah, no, look, as a dirty cop, I recognize you're a good one.
Yeah, so it sets us up, but this pisses him off, and he doesn't want to sit with them anymore, and he goes back to his room, and of course can't sleep because the light and guilt.
And I guess that's the big thing, is that for me personally, I think the light is an issue in this first night of him being able to get to sleep. But I think that there's a line later on in this movie that perfectly describes it. Every other night has nothing to do with the light. It's all about his guilt.
He thinks it does. He tries to tape up the windows and eventually starts putting pillows up against the window. And there's a great moment when Maura Tierney comes in later on, and he's like, it's so light in here, and she's like, nah, it's pretty dark, and she turns on the light switch, and it's like the sun just like turned on in his eyes, and he's like,
stop.
No, please, God, no, too much light. So I enjoy that. So anyway, so they question the kid, and actually I really, because there was some bruises on the body that were older than the murder, right? So they go and question the kid at the school, and he's trying to act all tough. He's this kind of like, like punk who listens to metal and doesn't care about anything. And Pacino gets right in his face and starts asking about the bruises, starts asking about all this stuff. And one of my favorite, it's a really dark line, but one of my favorite lines of the whole thing is when he starts saying, hey, did she know someone else? Like, all these locals might think like you could do this, but it's pretty clear you're too stupid to actually not kill someone. And like, if you killed her, you'd probably have done it in like front of 3 witnesses like an idiot. So it's not you. So tell me you're not stupid enough to like leave yourself as the last person who saw her alive, because that'll make you look so guilty. And he's like, okay, we know she had someone, but she never said who. And Al Pacino says, like, how hard did you try to like get her to tell you? And he says, pretty hard. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that is it's a good line, but it's a dark line. And I like it really paints a picture. And I guess that also, if you're going to compare it to Twin Peaks a little bit, like the more you find out about Laura Palmer in Twin Peaks, the more you realize that her life was not happy before that murder. Like it was like, you know, and this doesn't get as weird or dark as that by any means, but this did come across like, oh shit, like you're a piece of crap. Like
no, it's you. We established this boyfriend already is not a good guy. Just from like the first time you see him and the first lines he says, he's already a dick. But then you really establish like, no, but like he did hit her. Like that is a thing that happened in this movie. And so even if he didn't kill her, which Al Pacino is pretty early on, like you were saying, is certain that he didn't. Yeah. Because he's too stupid to do so.
And this is something that comes up a few times, is that Pacino, he's met killers. You know, he's good at looking in someone's eyes and just knowing that you're just not the guy. Like he just knows. Which shows. So this is all important stuff though, because it obviously he becomes this like potential red herring that Williams wants to use for the police, right?
But like he said, the police, the locals would be like, yeah, no, he'd do it.
Yeah. And I think it's important here that it's presenting us with a character who seems plausible with the evidence that it could be him, and also is not very pleasant. So when Williams is trying to justify later on, like, hey, but he's a shithead who beat her up, you know, he'd probably do something worse someday. It's good that he might go to prison for this. Like, this is a great idea. I think it makes the moral point of like Pacino not wanting the innocent person to go to jail. It almost makes it more like by him being a shithead who's an awful person, but still wanting to like not have him go down for something he didn't do, makes it ultimately more powerful, I think, as a message. It's like it doesn't matter that he's this awful piece of shit.
Well, that's the defining line between Pacino's character and Williams' character, is that Williams believes that bad people need to be punished. It doesn't matter like specifically what for, so long as they're punished. Whereas Pacino's character believes like even if they're a great person, even if they're a nice guy, if they committed the crime, they need to pay for that crime.
Yeah.
And that's where that line comes down. And we see how that extension of that applies to his big confession at the end.
Yeah. So they find Kay, the murder victim's bag, and they've got this little plan where, okay, put out a news thing saying we're looking for this bag, describe it, but put it back where we found it with some stuff in it. The idea that they might catch the killer going back for it to like really, maybe he'll realize, oh shit, I didn't like pick that up from the crime scene or whatever, and he'll go and get it. But Pacino doubts it a little bit here. He's like, oh, maybe we shouldn't, because this is technically a bit of a tactic that's, you know, not necessarily.
Is that what you were getting from that? Because for me, before he goes on the whole doubting thing, he looks over at his partner. And it's only then does he turn to the guy and say like, hey man, maybe this won't work. It seems to me more like a delay tactic to not go back to LA, because he knows as soon as he gets back, his partner's going to cut a deal.
Oh, yeah. No, I never read it that way. I mean, maybe you're right. I kind of read it as like, because everything going on with IA and because his partner is probably going to put him in a position where he has to like stand up for everything he's done and every decision he's made. Like, even though I think as the audience, this tactic doesn't sound that bad to me. It doesn't sound unfair. It's like, no, like it doesn't, obviously, I'm assuming that they won't just throw him in prison for whoever picks up the bag. They have to like look into him and see if the other evidence lines up.
Right.
But yeah, like is getting a person of interest, this seems like a fair idea to me.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
I don't think, I mean, the only thing he throws out there is it's technically circumstantial. Like someone walking into the cabin is not technically confession of a crime. No. But more than not, they could probably at least use that as the jumping point to find more evidence for them.
Well, at this point, they even have a name or a person, so this would at least give them someone to look at. You know,
it is worth noting, from the bag, they did retrieve 2 items of note, which was her diary and a paperback novel that was written by Robin Williams' character. Yeah. But they just pass it off as, you know, trash, and who wants to read this drivel and see if there's anything important in it.
Yeah. Is there anything thematic in it that may be important? Obviously, it's later on he notices that at the back it says the author lives in this town, where it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah. That's a bit weird.
Yeah, that's a bit fishy. So they do this whole sting operation where they're waiting, and this is, the rocky area next to the ocean, and we've got the mist, which is, the poster that's used most often these days is Pacino standing in the mist.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks great. This sequence when it kicks off is very, very good. Like they catch him coming in. One of the local cops basically malfunctions with the megaphone, and it tips him off, so he goes on the run. And they give chase, they go in, and we get this chase in the fog, in the mist. And one of the local cops gets shot in the leg, nothing too serious, all things considered. But the big thing of the movie that really kind of propels where the rest of it's going to go is that Pacino fires at a figure in the mist, but it turns out that it wasn't Robin Williams' character, it was his partner, Hap. And I think what's so good about this is that, and this kind of ties into the way Hilary Swank sees him later at the very end of the movie, is that obviously a big part of this is that Pacino over the course of this is going to start to question, did I do that on purpose, because he was going to not turn him in, but effectively put him on a path where he might lose his career and his reputation and all that. Right. And I think in the moment there's not the actual gunshot itself, we can't really see clearly who it is either, so it never feels, and someone else just one of the other cops just got shot, so he's got reason to be on edge.
Oh yeah,
right,
for sure.
So it feels like a justifiable thing in the moment, but what's so good about it is that when he goes up and tries to help him and he realizes who it is, Hap gets scared and says, "Are you trying to kill me?" and is scared of him in his last few moments before he dies, and it's actually a really well done little scene. It's actually quite hard hitting.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because he's it's lethal. There's nothing he can do. But Al Pacino's character, who I guess I should call Will's just keeps on telling him it was a mistake. I promise you, it was a mistake. I swear. But you can feel just that shakiness because not only is his partner dying, but already he's questioning did I do that?
Yeah. Well, this is one of the other beautiful, polar things with Robin Williams' character, right? Who I'll just call Walter, I guess. It's probably not even an accent. They've both got names beginning with a W. That's probably an intentional thing. So later on, when Walter's talking about killing Kay, he says that it wasn't intentional. She laughed at him when he tried to kiss her, and he couldn't take that. He hit her to let her know that was a sign of disrespect, and then kept hitting her, and then he was strangling her, and it just kind of kept escalating. And he claims it was an accident, and he reiterates that over and over again, to the point where he says, "Hey, you know what it's like to accidentally kill someone. You did it with your partner. I did it with Kay." He kind of talks that way. And I think a big part of this movie that kind of sets Will's character on the right path is the more that comparison's brought up, and the more Walter tries to use that to manipulate him and to control him. I think that comparison is ultimately what helps him out in a weird way, because having Robin Williams justify what he did by saying it was an accident and he doesn't deserve to be punished for it, whereas we know ultimately that Pacino's character Will is good because he didn't mean to kill him. It was a genuine accident, right? It wasn't something that he, as he points out later on, it took 10 minutes to strangle and beat Kay to death. The comparison isn't really that valid, but in his head it is. In his head, the guilt is mounting up, and he feels did I do this? The fact that he is even looking for this answer and questioning, did I do this? Do I need to be held accountable for this? Versus Robin Williams' character, who is immediately no, I can justify this. I didn't do this. This was an accident. I am not a monster. I deserve to live my life. Their reactions to not the exact same, but similar enough that you can draw parallels between them, is a big thing, I think, that ultimately sets Will's character on his ultimate path at the end, where he's no, I'm going to stand up and treat what I did the right way. Because obviously up until that point in the movie, he is covering it up. He's hiding it. He's he's being sneaky about it. He's
doing a bunch of bad cop things.
Yeah, to keep it under wraps. And ultimately, the coming clean, which will inevitably happen when he does the right thing, is a choice he makes, because he's not Robin Williams' character. He's not Walter.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on there. And the major thing that sets them apart is that Al Pacino's character feels he did the wrong thing. Not that he's guilty or anything like that, but that he
Yeah.
He did something bad. And it goes back to that earlier point I was making, is that people who commit a crime need to be punished for that crime. He committed a crime, but he was covering it up. He was trying to get away from it, and that guilt ate him away. Whereas Robin Williams believes if you're a good enough person, then you shouldn't be punished for it. Like if it was all just happenstance. And he sees himself obviously as a good enough person. So he sees it's that different way of viewing the morality of it.
Yeah, and of course Robin Williams' character Walter sees this, we find out later, because he uses it to taunt Pacino. He treats him like he's a friend that he can confide in.
Like, I get it. This entire movie needs that to happen, but with how dense the fog is and the assumption I'm making that Robin Williams' character kept running away from the cops, I really don't understand where he was to see this shooting take place. Except for the fact, I guess it could be justified by he knows that the Al Pacino's character was on his tail, and he knows that he didn't shoot the partner.
Yeah,
so
I'm assuming that once he heard the gunshot, maybe, and like maybe heard the voices and then got a little closer to see. And then by this point, Al Pacino's so wrapped up in like his dying friend, that he's not as aware of his surroundings as he would have been.
That's fair.
Yeah, that would be how I'd look at it probably. So this is obviously the big thing of the movie, right? It's the big inciting thing that really sets us on. And I love that there's little motivators for each thing. Obviously, one of the key details here is that Robin Williams dropped his gun, right? And that's not the gun that was used to shoot Hap. It was, it was Pacino's backup gun. Like, so he's got his regular gun and he's got one in his back that he switches to, which you see him do. And one of the key things throughout the movie is that, okay, so he's got the killer's gun and the police don't know about it. He keeps it a secret. He later uses that on a dead dog that he finds in an alleyway, so that he can get a bullet that's been fired, and he swaps it out with the real bullet that was taken from his partner, so the ballistics won't tie to him. And that's the big thing he does. What I love about that is that decision to go and do that, because up until that point, okay, he's hid the gun and he's leaving out some details, but this is obviously straight up he is conspiring now to cover it up, and he's doing multi-step plans to cover his tracks. This is motivated because it's after a phone call with Internal Affairs where he feels judged, and he feels unrightly judged because they're judging him for things that he, in the past that he obviously doesn't feel. Well, obviously one thing he does feel maybe a bit conflicted on, but he I think the fact that he feels judged, and now they're just he's hey, it'll be good to see that report about what happened to your partner up there. This is all a bit fishy, and he feels he has to defend himself, and that motivates him going out and doing all this cover-up stuff. So it does that smart script thing, but there's always a motivator for the next thing that he does. There's always a motivator for that next thing.
There are very few scenes in this movie that I think could actually be cut and not impact the movie as a whole. It's very tightly written in that way.
Absolutely. The other thing that happens around here is Kay's funeral, which is where Pacino goes and talks to Catherine Isabel's character, who is Kay's best friend, but also seems to be with her boyfriend. That's why the photo was torn up, is that she found out that, the main girl, the dead girl, found out that her boyfriend was cheating on her with Catherine Isabel. Yeah, and then that's the other thing. So Pacino's hey, why don't you come take a ride with me? And Catherine Isabel's yeah, all right. And she immediately starts flirting with him in the car. She's cop. She's clearly the small town girl who hates her town, wants to go somewhere exciting. She's a cop from Los Angeles. Oh, this is exciting. Even though Pacino's 67 or whatever he is at this point.
Sorry, real quick, I'm just going to look up a tiny little show called Twin Peaks. I just feel like I've seen a few things carrying over here. Just a couple tiny little things.
Yeah, I guess that kind of, you can make a comparison there as well. I don't think it feels like Twin Peaks though. As much as you can.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't feel like Twin Peaks, but there's just enough elements that are carried over between both. The plot's totally different, but character-wise, there's 7 of them. Also,
I will point out the irony here that in real life, Al Pacino just announced that he got his girlfriend pregnant, who I think is in her 20s. So this is not actually that strange from that perspective, but.
Yeah.
But notably, the character in the film here, he sort of smiles and jokes that he's going along with what she's saying. ultimately he takes her to where they found the body at the dump and is like, this is where your best friend was found, now talk, you little bitch. Like
That's practically a direct line. I mean,
yeah, he's like, she's here wrapped in plastic. No, that's a Twin Peaks line, I didn't mean to say that. Like, no, she was found here, like, who was this guy? Like, and she's like, no, we knew she had someone, but it was a secret, she didn't tell us who it was. And it's not too long after this where he starts getting the phone calls from Walter.
She does give away one thing. She used a code name, like a fake name for him, and it was Brody, which does lead him, when he gets the call from Walter, he's looking at Walter's book and it says a Brody detective adventure.
Yeah.
On it.
Yeah, that obviously, he doesn't just jump to that, because it would be such a leap to just assume it's the writer of the book that was in her bag. Yeah, it's the Brody, then the fact that he lives here is what clues him in. That's the second phone call. The first one's when he's at his hotel, and he's like, oh, you've been going a few days without sleep now, Will. Like, hey.
Which, maybe this is only a me thing, because I've watched the movie like 3 times. I watched Good Will Hunting, and having him say Will in like the exact same tone that he talks to Matt Damon's character in Good Will Hunting, I just couldn't get it out of my head, like his character in that.
Never thought of that. I've seen Good Will Hunting once a while ago, but I never...
I enjoyed it, and I've seen it like 3 times, so that character is far more in my mind than Walter Finch.
So, yeah, like, so it becomes this thing where, like, he wants to meet Will, and he wants to meet him in person, although because he's figured out who he might be, Will actually goes to his apartment and ends up running into him almost, and we get a chase scene that is running across the logs on the water where Pacino almost dies. He falls in the water and he has to climb his way back out, and he goes back to his apartment, to Walter's apartment, to look for stuff, and he plants what was Walter's gun anyway, admittedly, but he plants the gun back in his place and behind the vent. And of course, Walter calls him on the phone and says, hey, you're probably back at my place, because where else would you go after that fall in the water? Have a shower, there's clean towels in the bathroom. He's very friendly about the whole thing. He's trying to build up a camaraderie. But it leads to a meeting in public on the ferry, right?
Yep.
And this is where we get the plumber line that we brought up earlier. But basically, Walter's like, look, I know you killed your partner and you don't want them looking into this, so how about, you help me effectively, we both get to keep our lives. The boyfriend did it, right? They're going to call me in for questioning. And I think something that, bothers me a little bit as well about his character, in a way that I think it's supposed to, is that Pacino, assuming he's going along with this, right? And I think you always question if he really is actually agreeing to work with him, or if he's just playing along until he can get him later. Which it seems like he is, because he wants to find the dress, the smoking gun that'll prove that this guy is the killer. But when Robin Williams is basically saying, "Oh yeah, I'll give them this bit of evidence. I'll talk about how the boyfriend was abusive," and Pacino's like, "No. It sounds too good if you just give them a suspect. You have to let them find the boyfriend. Admit that you knew her, because they know that already. That'll be too suspicious if you try and lie about that." He gives them legitimate good advice.
See, you say that, but I don't think so. I think he phrases it as if it's good advice, but when we get to the scene later, he gives up Ricky anyway, and the cops fall for it. The cops are 100% hook, line, and sinker on it. I think he knew that these cops are willing to suspect Randy, the boyfriend, and so he was telling him, don't bring up Randy, because the cops are totally gonna believe you, and I don't want them thinking about Randy.
It sounded like legit advice, because I think if you look at it from a perspective of if it was him, right, who was hearing the information,
but if these cops are smart, that's what he's saying. For me personally, that's how it would work. But these cops are stupid. And so he's phrasing it in the way that makes sense, but he knows, in the end game, he just doesn't want Randy brought up at all.
Well, no, I agree that's his goal here. I think he doesn't want him to bring up the boyfriend, and you said Ricky a second ago. Is it Ricky or Randy? Make your mind up.
Sorry, Randy. My bad.
Right?
Daryl.
I think he gives him good advice, but the goal is ultimately to still delay the idea of going after the boyfriend, because he knows the boyfriend's innocent. So He
Yeah,
would
that's what I
rather,
was saying. Yeah.
he'd rather not do that. But I think it's that thing where he's giving him legitimately advice that also helps what he's trying to achieve. It's that, bury the lie in a lot of truth to make it sound convincing kind of thing, right?
That's fair.
I think that's kind of what he's doing here. And I think the reason why I'm sort of fighting your point there a little bit is because, well, maybe he thinks these cops as a whole, like, would probably buy this thing. I think one of the best parts of the film, the heart of the film, is how he views Hilary Swank's character. And I don't think he thinks she's an idiot. In fact, there's a really good bit that I think is already before this scene, actually, where, so after the shooting of his partner, they technically put her on that case. It's like, hey, this is a separate case. You look into it, write it up, do it. Because he basically the captain basically thinks, oh, this is a nothing thing. Just write the report. We know what happened. And that's the end of it.
It's worth noting that she specifically says that she has never been put on a felony.
Yeah.
She's always on misdemeanors. Like, they don't trust her yet to do big things.
And Pacino does say to her, like, hey, don't knock those. Like, those are still important. And those are still things that have to be dealt with. And, looking, like, the way you catch people is still the same, whether it's a murder or something that's a misdemeanor.
You look at these small details and you see how they don't add up.
Right? He gives her good advice. So she writes up the report, she gets like his opinion on where he was standing on the map and all that stuff, and she comes up with the report, and I think it's before this part of the movie, I think it's before he meets Robin Williams.
Yep.
Where she hands him the report, and I think this is like one of the best little moments in the whole movie that tells you deep down like who he really is and what like ultimately where it's going, is because she hands him the report, it's all done, this is before she sort of went digging deeper to find anything that doesn't match with his story or anything like that. So right now, like, all he has to do is sign it as the supervising officer, and that's it, done. Like, the murder of his partner will never be questioned.
Yep.
And he chooses not to sign it, and he says, hey, your name's on this is important, make sure you go check all the details. He provokes her to go digging, which I think you can read this like 3 different ways, and I think all of them are valid, and I think they're all working at the same time. I think
so for me, my reading of it is that he saw the place where he had to sign it. He immediately thought of, I have this internal affairs thing going on. I'm already guilty about my partner. And like you're saying, he's kind of just like, okay, well, I don't like the story as it's being told now. You go through and you make sure that this absolutely cannot be traced back to me. And only at that point will I sign.
You are such a cynical prick. That is not even one of the things I thought of.
That's not. I'm not trying to come off as like a cynical thing. I'm not saying that he's trying to like get away with it.
Oh God, no, you're wrong.
I think he's,
this is awful. No.
It was okay. Hold on. Let me re-explain here. So it's not so much of him trying to get away with it in a criminal sense, but it's more so of that if he puts his name on this and it eventually comes out when internal affairs or at any point that actually he did shoot his partner, this is going to be the thing that is like the worst thing for him ever.
You're so cynical. So
that's how I read. I don't know
that's not the story of the goddamn movie. So I think there's a few ways you could read this. I didn't read it as that at all. Like, They're all positive, all the ones I've got, because this is a positive moment in the character's story. This is the moment that tells you that deep down, he doesn't want to be acquitted of this, right? This is, him challenging her to go and look is like, no, like, I can't. Deep down, he doesn't want to just get away with it, right? That's one. Number 2, he doesn't want to sully her, right? And that's a big key thing at the end of the movie as well. Is that her name's on this, and he doesn't want to bring her down to his new level because he actually respects that she's this eager cop who actually believes in what she's doing and doesn't want her reputation or just who she is to be brought down by handing in this report that he knows on some level. And the funny thing is, she's not even choosing to do anything wrong here. As far as she's aware at this point, it's accurate. It's only when she goes digging deeper that she starts to find other clues.
Yes.
So this moment I think is so good because it reveals how he's kind of deep down actually feeling about it, and not even on a conscious level. Like I think that's the beauty of it, is that in the moment he makes this choice, and I'm not so sure if you asked the character right after he did that, like why did you just do that? You almost just had a get out of jail free card effectively handed to you, and he just couldn't do it. And I think it's a combination of how he really feels about it, but also how he doesn't want to corrupt her.
So I'm willing to accept that. I don't think that it's an invalid reading. I think that's just as valid. However, my counterpoint towards the idea of him wanting to be caught and him like egging her on is towards the end of the movie, she has the evidence. She suspects him of lying. She has all the reason to believe that. And when she confronts him and says, hey, we don't have backup weapons, do we? He says no. He lies and says he doesn't have one either.
No, that's true. But, like, I don't think that disputes anything in this scene because, first of all, by the time we get to that point in the movie, he is so goddamn tired.
Yeah,
and
he's a very different person.
Like, he just kind of grunts that at her without really giving it much thought. And at that point as well, keep in mind, this happens before he's even met Robin Williams. By the time that scene comes up later, he's went through so much shit with Robin Williams where he's been, like, fighting to try and, like, you know, keep everything secret. You know, he gives her, like, a half response. I think this is a very important moment in the overall journey of the character.
I think, don't get me wrong, I think that deep down the character does want to be caught. I agree with that. I think that is in his most basic level, that is what he wants.
And even even if you discount that part of it, though, I think this idea of that he can't bring himself to let her not be the best cop she can be, to not do what he thinks she's capable of, which I think's the heart of it more than anything, is that he's not going to let her not do a good job, even if it means his ultimate downfall. He's still challenging her to go do that.
But see, that even still fits into my theory as well. Of he's sending her out saying, like, look, if anyone's going to be able to crack this, it's going to be you. I want you to go over all the details and figure this out and see if even you could figure this out. I think that he does have faith in her of being that good cop. I don't think that that's invalid with what my theory is either. So I agree that that's also a major part of it. That is the heart of it as well.
But in your side of things, if he does believe in her, then what? Like, how is it this cynical thing where he's sending?
Again, I think that that's surface level. I think that surface level, he doesn't want to be caught. But I do agree that on the most basic level, that guilt, that is the entire point of the movie, is eating him away. That's the reason why he's like, look, if I'm putting the best possible person on this so that it can theoretically come to light. Like, if he really wanted to have it the other way around, he could easily get anyone else to, like, run the investigation or sign off on it. The captain would almost certainly agree with him of, like, yeah, sure, we'll put someone better on it, more or less.
Which is why I don't think it, like, what you've said matters that much, though, in the context of what the scene's doing. Like, because you see, you can just pass it off to the captain if it's about having his name on it.
No, yeah, and again, that's what I'm saying, though, is that from a basic level, of the most base level of a character, his guilt is eating him away. He does want to be caught. But I think that the reason that he doesn't sign there, and I mean the reason that he doesn't let Robin Williams come forward either, because that was Robin Williams' whole thing, is like, look, you turn me in, I'll turn you in. That's as easy as that. I think that he does have some reason not to want to be caught. Like, he does want to be able to at least finish this.
Obviously, no one's, like, when we're talking about him wanting to be caught, he doesn't actually want to be caught most of the movie on a surface level. Obviously, he's trying the whole movie to not be caught. We're saying that deep down on some level, when he was faced with an easy choice, he didn't take that way out, though, right? He actually actively chose not to sign this, which is why I think it's a really important character beat that is more subconscious than anything else, but maybe more on the surface is about, like, her. It's more about not having her dragged down by being a part of the falsehood that he's kind of, you know, spinning.
And I think that's a fair reading, but I just also see it as part of the thing of, this is a false statement, and we've already established that his major confession, his big thing when we get to later on, is regarding a false statement, a false chain of evidence. And I think that's a thing that he doesn't want that guilt on her just as much as he doesn't want to have it blow back in his face.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. What are you talking about?
No, you're discounting the whole blowing back in his face side of things. You don't think that's a part of it at all. I agree that your part's a thing of it, but also my thing.
I don't know. I don't get that. It was because it was again earlier on when we were talking about the bag tactic of trying to catch the guy. Like, I don't know, you're reading that, and this obviously they both sync up, they both link together. Yeah. And I just didn't read either of those with this kind of, like,
that's fair.
You know, him trying to I don't know, like
again, maybe this is again me wanting the character to be slightly darker than he is. You seem to be coming into this with him being a very like moral, upstanding kind of guy, where I'm viewing him as a lot more shades of darker than by the end of the film he's represented as.
Well, I don't know if I'd describe him as upstanding necessarily, but like he is a character who clearly has done something bad. Although he believes the ends justified the means. That's a phrase that comes up later, and it's very much key to the themes of the film. Is it worth doing something that's technically wrong for an ultimately good goal? And can you live with that? Like, that's kind of the thing that's come up when we get to his confession, which I think we can more or less just dive into
just
now.
say it now, yeah. Sure.
Because when he's at his lowest point, when they've arrested the kid, the boyfriend. And it seems like the case is done and everything's over, and he's having drinks with the others. He goes back
he's gone 6 days without sleep at this point.
And he goes back to the hotel. He's struggling to sleep, and Maura Tierney, who's popped up a couple times throughout the film in a sort of casual way, comes in to talk to him because he's making noise or whatever, and there's complaints from the neighbors.
Yeah,
he just kind of like, at this point in the film though, because he's at this turning point where it's time to go, and he doesn't know at this point that Hilary Swank started to piece some things together that kind of like imply that he did, he was the one that fired the gun that killed the partner, right? She's starting to piece that together based on a shell she found, based on the fact that she knows he carries a backup weapon, so on and so on. But he is like, okay, it's time to go, and he's feeling conflicted about that. He doesn't know how to feel about anything, and he's flat out said at this point, like, he's not even sure, like, did he mean to kill his partner yet? I mean, he says it a lot more when he's talking to Swank right at the end, but he's feeling conflicted. And there's that great scene earlier on as well where he has to call his partner's wife and tell her.
Oh yeah, that's a great scene.
Yeah, because it's just him on the phone. You never see her. And he's just sort of saying, yeah, like, he's gone, he's dead. And the wife says, when you find him, you don't arrest him. Are you hearing me? So, and that plays into the idea as well of justice and what is justice, what is revenge, kind of thing.
I do like, especially if we're talking about the phone call now, I especially like the specific line in there where he's telling her what happened, but it's all lies by omission. He doesn't, she's like, oh, what happened? And he's like, we were in a foggy area, and the killer, I was chasing him, and then he got shot.
He never actually says a sentence that's wrong. Everything he says is accurate. It's just, like you say, lies by omission. So he talks to Maura Tierney, and for whatever reason, he chooses her to be this, like, confessional. Like, he needs to ask her opinion. It's right after she says that, like, she is someone who wasn't born here. She's someone who moved here to, get away from something.
Yeah.
And so he talks about this case that was about 1.5 years ago, where this guy would watch this young boy who was, waiting to be picked up after school every day, and eventually worked up the nerve to kidnap him. And he never actually says anything too specific, but he just says he made him do things, which definitely implies sexual to me. So it sounds like this guy kidnapped a kid, tortured him sexually for like 3 or 4 days, and then ultimately killed him. But didn't even do a good job of it, where the kid had to suffer in a noose until he eventually died. He didn't properly like break his neck or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so pretty heinous, right? This sounds like horrific. It sounds like a horror show. And we get this thing where, okay, there wasn't enough evidence. He knew, as soon as he met this guy, he knew deep down this was the guy that did it.
Right.
And there just wasn't enough evidence. But he's looked in, a jury doesn't know what it's like to look into a killer's eyes, but he does, because he's done it before. And obviously you can debate in a grand sense, like, can you count on instinct? You probably shouldn't. There's a reason why we just did 12 Angry Men on the Criterion show talking about reasonable doubt. So obviously, this shouldn't be just like the, justifiable in its own right. But he was so convinced that he planted evidence. He took some of the boy's blood from his corpse and planted it into this guy's place. And it's actually a little drop of the blood actually spilling on his shirt, his sleeve, that opened the movie. That's the close-up of what you're seeing at the start. This is literally, staining his clean reputation.
We keep cutting back to, throughout the course of this movie, what seems to be the cotton of the shirt getting drenched with this blood, and it just stains it solid red, and it just is a repeating motif over and over again.
So he's basically saying, like, I couldn't let him walk. I had to put him away. Like, do you think in this case the ends justified the means? I can't remember exactly how he phrased it, but that's effectively the question.
Yeah, that's pretty much, yeah. And then Tierney says, like, basically what it comes down to is, what are you willing to live with? That's what it's all about. Like, you're the only one that you have to answer to in the end.
Did you think it was right at the time, and were you willing to live with it? And I think the thing with the movie is that on some level, I think he is willing to live with that, because ultimately he believes he put away the person who was responsible. But I think the point of this scene is that he's not going to be able to live with this, what the movie's, been about. He's not going to live with letting this go, because his partner's death has to be answered for by him, and the murder of the teenage girl has to be answered for by Robin Williams' character.
Yeah, no, for sure, because it is this idea of, like I said twice now, whoever committed the crime needs to be punished. That's the way he views the world. That's the way it has to be, and that's what he explains in this story. Like, this guy, even if the justice system found him innocent, he committed the crime, and as the audience, we're led to believe that he's right. There's no reason to doubt his testimony there.
Yeah, it sounds, as reasonable as it can without more details.
So with that in mind, he has the only two guilty parties here in this movie are himself and Walter. And both of them are about to get off scot-free, which obviously does not jive with the way he views the world. So he has to go out and correct that.
Oh, that said, though, I also do want to acknowledge that clearly, though, this planting of evidence and sort of betrayal of the rules and his morals is still a stain on his conscience, because it is something that ultimately he doesn't want Hilary Swank to do at the end. He stops her and says, no, don't lower yourself. Never lose who you are in this. Because obviously that is important. And I think...
Yeah.
Because our key thing here is that he puts his badge back on. He actually took his badge off like way earlier in the movie and put it in the drawer.
3.
Yeah. And he's not had it on since. And he puts it back on. And I think it's this idea that he's going to do one last good act as a cop before it probably is going to come to an end because of what happened to his partner. He's going to do one last thing. And maybe it'll kill him. Maybe he'll die. But I don't think he's necessarily going on a suicide mission. I think it's just, no. This is the one last good thing I'm going to do, and this badge means something to him. He's going to make it matter in the ending.
Now, I do want to point out, though, when he stops Hilary Swank from throwing away evidence that would otherwise just prove him guilty, do you think he would have done it if she was going to, like, do something to an innocent man? Because, again, his whole viewpoint is... the people who commit the crime have to be held accountable. He did commit the crime, and she was about to let him get off free. It's more so him saying, like, look, I did it. Let me face the consequences. I don't think it's as much of him saying, don't be someone who, for instance, wouldn't plant evidence to get someone who did it, as he did before. That's where I'm wondering where that side comes down on. Because the way the movie sells it, it seems like he wants her to be a by-the-books cop. He wants her to do, like, not plant evidence on guilty people either. But because of the way that it was framed, it's only saying, hey, look, do cops at least the same way that I do cops, where do whatever it takes to get the guilty people.
I disagree. I think you're so, like, laser focused on this. Someone did the crime, therefore they're guilty and should be put away. I think you're laser focused on that. He clearly says to her in this final scene when he's dying, after he's been shot by Robin Williams, no, don't lower yourself. Right? He clearly says that. I think that is him saying that he does, like, there was a path that he went on when he planted evidence. He's saying, no, don't lose yourself. I think that's why Hilary Swank's character is so important to this film, because he sees maybe even a younger version of himself that he's like, she idolizes him, but in reality, by the end of the film, he kind of, idolizes what she is, because this is him before he lost himself, before he lowered himself for what he thought was justifiable at the time, but now, like, he's realized what he's lost in the process of doing that.
And I agree. I think that is how the movie portrays it, and I think that's the best way to read it. I was just wondering, do you think that, if say Al Pacino's character were to make it past the end of this movie, would he oppose her of, letting like that child killer free because there wasn't enough evidence?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
That's the arc of the movie. I think by the end he would do things differently. I think that's the point. Like by the end he's like, no, under no circumstance, like don't lose who you are. If you're a good cop, and stay a good cop. And I think that's part of the thing is that at the start of the movie when he's talking to his partner, he says he's a good cop, and we believe that he believes him. But I think at the end of the movie he's realized that he was pretending that he was still a good cop, but on some level that wasn't really true anymore. I mean, sure, he's better than a lot. He's better than a lot of real cops, let's be honest.
Oh yeah.
But
for sure.
Like, if anything, that's the one weird thing about like watching this now in like 2023 is that there's been so much more, on the news and things about police brutality and corruption and things. That I think the world's view on specifically American police is very different. The idea that he has this respect and honor for the badge, and that's why he puts it away and then puts it back on when he's going to do something good at the end. That if anything, just the real world kind of like makes you feel a bit more cynical about that one element of it. But I think in the context of the story itself, it all works, and you understand what it represents to him, and you understand, what all this stuff is doing and saying.
Yeah,
but
because like, if he were to have made it out of this movie, like you said, he didn't intend on going on a suicide mission, most likely. I think the next step would have been he goes back to LA and just goes to internal affairs and says, all right, what do you want to know?
Yeah, I think he probably would be open about it. I think, I don't think the movie's ending is very cynical. I think it is quite, wholeheartedly presenting us with, no, he has changed. The advice he's giving her is not just because he's dying and doesn't have to face it. Like, I think if he was going to live, he'd still say that. But obviously, you've also got the thematic point where him dying is also him finally being allowed to sleep. And the idea that he's allowed to sleep and rest now, even though it's technically death, is because he cleared his conscience. There's that line,
absolutely.
Just after the halfway point, give or take, where she's picking him up at the hotel, and she's like, hey, you said this once, that a good cop can't sleep because there's a piece of the puzzle missing, but a bad cop can't sleep because he's got a guilty conscience. And he kind of smiles and, oh, I said that. Sounds like something I'd say. But it's, obviously it's very thematically true to the movie. That
honestly, to the point where that feels kind of just like, audience, I want to make sure you're getting this now. Pay attention.
Yeah. I mean, I think, her little investigative bits are all solid enough on their own.
Yeah, I mean, if you go through her entire plot, it's very bare bones what she actually has to go through to find enough evidence to put him away, because she looks at the map, she does a little what could charitably be called library research scene where she's just looking over all the evidence and then comes to the realization of like, he couldn't have been standing where he said he was. And then she finds the shell casing.
Why does this all
beach.
Sound framed so negative? Like you're
it's not. I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to matter-of-factly say what her plot is.
It's so bare bones. I'm going to generously call this a research scene. Like everything's just shrouded in this negativity.
Maybe I'm negative. I don't know.
It doesn't need to be any more than it is.
You look at the ratings over this show, I've always been at least a half point over you.
I know, but you sound so much more negative when we actually talk about things.
Maybe I'm just filling in for Connor. That's it. That's all it is.
She's a supporting character. Ultimately, it's Pacino's story, and that's who gets the time. That's who gets the fleshed out, right?
I guess what I'm trying to say is the fact of this thing that is a major impact for the character of Will Dormer. It's at most maybe like 5 minutes of screen time collectively that really piece it all together, because while it is this thing that very majorly impacts him, it's not the focus of the story, like you're saying. It is this, like, we need to have this happen so that we can get to the point where he is able to clear his conscience.
Yeah, I mean, when you said there it only adds up to about 5 minutes of screen time if you add it all up, I mean, my response to that, if you hadn't kept going, would have been, well, and? Does it need more?
Yeah. No,
yeah.
Like I said, there's no scene in this movie that I feel like I could remove and the movie could still fully function as well as it does. Everything feels critical, including her side of things.
Yeah, aside from maybe the blowjob joke.
That's the only one. That's the one scene.
Could step that out probably, and that'd be fine. Because one of the things we glossed over, obviously, because we were talking about the emotional
Confession.
climax and all that.
Yeah.
Is the scene where Robin Williams does come out of the police station to give his statement, and then says everything that Pacino told him not to say in front of him when he's pretended he's never met him before. And Pacino's getting really riled up, and they're like, oh. And it becomes clear throughout this conversation that Robin Williams has planted. He's found the gun. He found the gun that Pacino planted in his house, which was originally his anyway. But he's found that and planted it on the boyfriend's place. And Pacino wants to go and try and get it, but he's like, no, he's opening up to you. You're the one he's talking to. So Pacino intentionally gets angry and starts yelling and like threatening to him. So
I immediately was just like, oh, Christopher Nolan was rehearsing his Dark Knight interrogation scene pretty early on in his career here.
So he has to go cool off, which is a good excuse to drive over to the boyfriend's place. And this is all very noble because he's trying to like protect someone who, while he's a shithead, is innocent of this crime. So he's actually trying, and I loved it when the rest of the cops show up with the warrant, right? Which, by the way, I don't believe you can get a warrant this quickly, but that's fine. We'll move on. But he's searching. The other cops show up, and he hides in the bathroom, and the other cops come in. They start searching. I love that after a couple of minutes, when no one's watching the bathroom door, he just casually walks out as if he's just arrived. And just walks up, because he's a cop, he's meant to be here, but he can't be caught being in there before they've opened the door. So it's just, I just love how sly it is. It's just a sly little thing.
Yeah, it feels like there's going to be like this entire scene of him trying to like sneak out before he gets caught and anything like that, but then immediately he just gets the opening of like, oh, I guess I can leave now. All right, cool.
Yeah, another parallel as well between Walter and Will. So one of the things Pacino said early on is that Walter will kill again because he clearly has crossed this line and he's like done it so efficiently and with such care. Which, by the way, he points out later as well, you know, when Robin Williams says that he never touched her like that, he's like, yeah, so that's why you trimmed her nails and cleaned her hair, because after you killed her, this was as close you could get to being intimate, was like dressing her up after the fact. So I like that detail. But he is like, you know, he's going to do this again. And I think that ties in as well. Obviously, at the end, he is about to do it again because, you know, Hilary Swank comes out to like collect some evidence from him, and he intentionally leaves like the dress out so she'll notice it and she gets suspicious. So you'll have to, because that's the thing. When Pacino shows up, he's like, "Hey, she's here. She knows that you've done something. Well, we're going to have to deal with her." Like, no, you wanted her to be something you had to deal with. You put her in this position as much as you could. So I think this idea that once he's crossed that line, he's going to do it again, I think that also tracks with Pacino's character. Once he planted evidence once, even if it was for something he believed was a good, justifiable cause, even if it's outside the law, ultimately he's going to do it again. And sure enough, throughout the course of this film, he started doing it again to cover up this, you know, accident that happened.
And it is for less and less noble reasons.
Yes,
the first time, it is a definite child murderer getting off. That's sure, why not? Noble reason. But then you get him planting this gun back in Williams' place, and it's like, okay, well, yeah, that's still noble. You're trying to plant evidence on a guy who killed this girl, fine. But then he switches out the shell casing that shot his friend, and it's like, okay, but that one, there's no reason for you to do that, buddy.
Yeah. So, like, I think that, again, it's a really good mirroring between those two characters, and I think ultimately, you know, it's him realizing that he's going down this path at the end and choosing not to continue repeating and becoming more, you know, him becoming a dirty cop is a lot like Robin Williams becoming a serial killer, where they're both like at that stage where they're just starting to become those things.
Yeah, it's also worth mentioning that Robin Williams, we said before, he wrote detective novels. He is a writer. He says here, like, I did want to be a detective.
Yeah.
Like, I always looked up to cops. That's why I write these novels. I just couldn't pass the tests. And
our Eternal Affairs would have taken you if you'd asked them.
Yeah, exactly. We should have applied there. Would have been great. But no, that's just one of those things where it feels like there was a point where both of them were the same person, and then being a cop is the point where they diverged, where Al Pacino managed to become a cop and Robin Williams' character did not. And that's the point where they started going down these different paths of who they were as people, but their core fundamental who they are underneath has a lot of similarities.
Similar, I wouldn't say same person. I don't think I'd agree with that.
No.
That
because again, they had different moral codes.
Yeah,
but they do have similar like ways of doing things.
And we have no idea of like what personality-wise they were like when they were at
Sure,
that
yeah.
similar age or whatever. So I wouldn't go that far, but yeah, there's obviously a lot of parallels that are placed between them. And like I say, it's very important for Pacino's character because it's like basically recognizing, and every time William says, "Hey, we're just alike because you did this just like I did," obviously he doesn't like that. He like, tries to defend himself. He gets angry. He's like, "No, don't compare me to you." But the realization that he's kind of right, there are similarities, is what makes him realize, oh wait, I have done something bad. I can't go down this path. It's a big part of him realizing what he's becoming and who he is. So I would kind of look at this as a story about a character who is ultimately good, but is falling off that wagon, but is able to realize he's doing it by the end to like redeem himself for these choices that he's made. Like that to me is what the story is. Yeah. But everything between the villain, between Hilary Swank, who plays the noble, young, idealistic version of a cop that he maybe one day was, they're all important as tools to tell his story. It's very much a movie with a central character who every other character ties into their themes, who evolves their story and gives them their key part. And I think the writing from that perspective is really good. There is one weird moment I want to point out that I don't quite like. It's not a big deal because it's like 2 seconds, but there is a moment when Pacino's packing to leave the next day where he looks over and his partner Hap's sitting in the chair, but he's transparent like a ghost, and I thought that was really weird.
I don't even remember that moment. I guess I might have been looking away there.
It's so quick, but he's like, I wouldn't have minded him just sitting there, but the fact that they faded him like he was a ghost just made it feel like... I get that he's just seen it in his head and he's just thinking about him. That's the only point of it. But I'm like, did you have to make him look like a ghost though? Like, because that
it probably would have been the same scene that I thought was a weird moment that wasn't elaborated on. When he gets ready to leave on his final day, Rachel Tierney's character is just asleep in his bed.
Maura Tierney.
Maura Tierney, my bad. But it's just asleep in his. I think that's her character's name is Rachel. But yeah, were they supposed to like have like a romance scene in the middle of there?
I don't think so. I think, there's not a single thing that hints at romance.
There isn't, but like I can't figure out why the hotel manager would fall asleep in one of the tenants' beds.
No, I don't think this is a problem. I think this is an intentional thing, is that she fell asleep and he's not, right? The idea that she is comfortable with who she is, so even though she ran to Alaska to get away from something, it's like, no, she can fall asleep, and she has fallen asleep after sitting talking to him, but he's still... So the idea that her conscience is clear now, but his isn't, and that's that's why it's like such a visual thing where it goes from her lying in the bed to him picking up his badge. Like, he can't do this yet, so he's going to go and But
I'll give you that. I guess she was kind of like a minor character, all things considered. We didn't get a lot into her backstory or like who she really was, so I never really considered her to be the representative of a clean conscience.
Yeah. At the very least, I don't know if... at the very least, she's at peace with whatever she did or whatever she has done in her past. And I don't think it's important what she did, which is why the movie doesn't even, try to get into it. It's just... but I think that's the point of that. Because falling asleep's such a big thematic thing in this movie. I don't think it's trying to imply anything else.
That's fair. I guess I would have liked it to see her fall asleep rather than already being asleep.
It's also
to make that point.
I think you see in the clock is 8 a.m. when he's leaving here, so clearly she was there talking to him until some silly time in the middle of the night, and eventually just passed out. And he's like, whatever. It's not like he's using the bed. So yeah. She's also fully clothed as well, just in case you want any other...
Oh, yeah,
evidence.
No, she's above the covers. There's no hint of anything happening there. It was just, I don't know, it caught me off guard. I was like, why is she still here?
Also,
she should have left.
Al Pacino at this point is like a zombie sitting there.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he is not functioning sexually in any capacity.
Can you imagine him expending the energy of sex and then still going on the next day? He would just collapse outside the hotel. There's no way he would have been able to continue. Especially because I think the bar scene is after that, correct?
No, it's before. It's before.
Okay.
He comes back to the hotel to pack after that bar scene, because that's where Hilary Swank like hugs him so she can feel if he's got a gun in the back. And she's very conflicted at this point because all the evidence is pointing to him lying about something, which is why because we kind of glossed over that part as well at the ending where just before he goes to confront Robin Williams, she has a gun on him and is like, you lied about your partner. Did you shoot him? And he's like, I did. And she's like, did you mean to? And he quite honestly at this point says, I'm not even sure anymore. Like, you know, I couldn't see, it was hard, but on some level, did I? I don't know. And I don't think he did. That's the thing. If you go back to that scene, it does seem pretty clear in the scene itself that it is just an accident. But that's kind of the point, though, is that Robin Williams sees his murder as an accident and justifies it repeatedly after the fact, whereas Al Pacino after the fact is like, no, did I, in some level, like subconsciously mean to do that?
Right.
You know?
So two points on that scene. First is, I agree with your reading of it as it was presented, but I think that if they wanted to play that mystery up a little bit more, they should have made it a bit more ambiguous during the shooting scene itself. Even something as simple as you see this figure emerging from the fog, or Al Pacino sees this figure emerging from the fog, and we just hold on Pacino for an extra 2 or 3 seconds, just to give the implication that he might have been able to see who it was through the fog.
I think the question is, though, did they want that to be a mystery? Like, and I would argue they didn't, because I think, again, the dichotomy of him and Williams' character is that his is a clear accident that he then feels guilty about because he's deep down a good person, and Williams' murder is clearly not an accident, but he convinces himself it is because he's deep down, well, a killer. You know,
right. But I think the fact that they are making that comparison, they do want the audience to at least question, like, are you closer to Williams' side or are you closer to the side of good? I think that is something the audience is being asked throughout this. I'm not saying they did it poorly. I just think that if they wanted that last moment to sink in of, he truly doesn't know whether or not he meant to shoot his partner, I think that could have been given just a little bit of extra in the beginning.
But this goes all the way back to one of the first things we talked about, is that this is a third person judging him rather than a first person viewpoint. And we're with Hilary Swank when she says, I know you didn't do it, even if you're not sure.
Right. And that's if they're going with that point of the movie, then yes, I agree it's done well. Second point I wanted to bring up. Why in the hell does Hilary Swank focus on Al Pacino's character and not chasing down Robin Williams, who is definitely the killer here?
Well, she's left alone with him, but not obviously very quickly when they start getting shot at, she gives him his gun back, and it's like, okay, there's an element of trust here. That he's sort of clawed back because he's confessed. It obviously felt very genuine. So I'm
just saying, if I was in a room with 2 people and one of those people just bashed me over the head and dropped me off in a shed, I'm not going to hold my gun on the guy who might have committed a murder, possibly.
He, at the moment, you know, I mean, I think it's because she cares more about him, because she feels possibly betrayed by him. Like, this is a bigger deal to her personally if he actually did this. But like I say, I love the idea that throughout the movie he's given her good advice and is effectively, you know, giving her training to either, if not catch him directly, then to be as good as him. And ultimately, like, you know, you could even look at it as some sort of passing of a torch by the end of the movie if you really want to.
Oh yeah, for sure. It absolutely is.
So, yeah. No, I think it's very good. I think, like, I think it does all of its character stuff really well. I really get into the redemption story of the character. I get into how the other characters represent and, like, are important to different parts of his story. And I think all that stuff's great, and it looks and sounds great. I like the music. The performances from the 2 leads are great. I think where maybe some people, like, aren't as into it is because either they expect more of an actual mystery because they're expecting like a Seven or a Fincher type killer movie, and it's not that. Or, of course, as the key thing that, you know, you've been bringing up a lot, is like expecting more of a Christopher Nolan twist to it, and it's not that either. It's a straightforward movie, but I think it's very good at what it actually does.
Oh yeah, no, for what it's trying to be, it succeeds entirely. I don't think that's ever been a problem the movie has. It is an issue of expectations going into it, which is why I think it is one of the more ignored Nolan films, is because everybody post Batman Begins is going back to check out these movies knowing Nolan as he is today.
Do you know, here's the thing though, I think it probably benefited me that I saw this after Batman Begins, and I probably saw Memento first before this one, And I think it probably helped that at that point I saw 3 Nolan movies. This was the third, and Batman's not like a, it is more conventional by its nature because it's a superhero movie. So Memento was the only one with the Nolan twist per se. Obviously, he'd done Following, but I didn't see Following until way late. I got the Criterion Blu-ray of that before I saw that much later. So I think at some level it probably helped that I didn't necessarily have a Nolan expectation other than just quality at that point, because I hadn't, like, whereas you'd already seen Prestige by the time.
I've seen Prestige. I've seen Inception at least a dozen times. I've seen Tenet.
Not before this, though.
That. Well, remember, I don't remember anything from this the first time I watched it.
Okay, so this is all fresh. Okay, yeah.
This is pretty much new going into it.
So you've seen Interstellar, you've seen Tenet.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, there's probably a lot more weight on this, whereas Following's different in that it's much smaller, but you can actually see a lot of who Nolan is going to be in that movie.
Exactly.
Whereas this is him playing more conventional studio ball, but it's very good at because conventional isn't necessarily bad if it's well done, if it's well told and it's well written and all these other things. But it is definitely the more conventional film in his filmography. And the Batman films are as well to a point, but they obviously have other things that are. They
obviously have Batman,
but they're also very layered films. Me and Cara don't review movies together anymore, but if you go back and listen to our, our 40 discussion on The Dark Knight, like we were talking about themes and what Batman stands for as a character and how the Joker, stands against that. And, it was a great discussion of it was like what we do when we're talking about a Criterion movie. We had that type of conversation about The Dark Knight because it's that goddamn good.
It is. So, I agree wholeheartedly.
And I think, there's a lot to love in this movie. And I find myself sticking up for it a little bit, I think, because I do think people just kind of overlook it and sort of disregard it as the one you can skip. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I think it's really good. It's just not like the rest of his movies. So people just kind of look at it differently because of that.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So, well, I guess it's time to rate the movie.
To rate it?
Yeah.
All right. I mean, I've been sitting on this for a while. I've been trying to figure this out on where exactly it's going to come down on. But I think looking not only at the other Nolan films, how I've rated those, but also just other films in general, I'm going to give this one a solid 8. I think that it's good. It's a great movie. It is up there in the echelon, but it isn't. It's just, maybe it is a thing of expectations. Maybe that's because I can't truly divorce myself from that, if I'm being honest. I can say the quality of the movie is great. I can say that the story is well paced. All of it is beautiful looking and sounding, but there was just this low level expectation of I wanted just a little bit more from it. And I was just kind of having that in the back of my mind the entire time I was watching it. But it is still, on all technical levels and all emotional levels, a fine movie. So 8 for that.
Yeah, I'm giving it an 8 as well. But an 8's always what I've given this, and I've never really wavered from it. So despite the debating we had throughout that, we're actually landing on the same score. I think it's great, and I think that's what an 8 out of 10 means. Obviously, it's not as special as some of Nolan's other films, but it's doing everything it does so well, and I do find it a very enjoyable watch. And I've seen it a good number of times now over the last 20 years, give or take. That it holds up, and when you watch it again and you're paying attention to the little details when you know what the full character journey is going to be, you kind of you get a little bit more out of it, and you can appreciate it. So yeah, it's good.
I mean, I don't think we're really going to fight that much on whether or not it makes the cut. I think we're probably on the same standing on that.
It makes the cut, yeah.
It makes the cut. Just pretty solid. Not cut above, not cutting it close. Just makes the cut.
Yeah. It's well worth watching. Just, have those expectations reined in a little bit if you're getting into it thinking, oh, I want Inception and Interstellar and Tenet and all these other things. So...
This is before he was given a blank check to do literally anything he wants.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because obviously it's bigger than Memento and that he's got bigger stars. It's clearly more studio backed than Memento was. Even the fact that there's a shot of a plane flying over a landscape at the start, it's like he couldn't have done that in Memento. Memento was all it was shooting in motels and like a small bar set and a whatever.
I did want to point out weird credit that I didn't expect. Executive produced by George Clooney.
Oh yeah, I saw that as well. It's kind of funny that they've never worked together at all again.
Yeah.
Because you'd feel like that would maybe lead to something, but no, it never.
Yeah.
At least as of now, they've never worked together.
Christopher Nolan hopped on Batman, and George Clooney's like, "I'm sorry, I refuse to go anywhere near that franchise again."
That sullied my reputation. I have to stay clear. Actually, minor little thing is that the pilot of the play at the start, I was convinced was Alan Tudyk for like a second.
Okay.
And then I looked it up and it wasn't him. It was just because you see like the back of his head and he turns around for a second. I was like, is this Alan Tudyk before he got any big roles? And it wasn't. It's some other dude.
Yeah, it's some guy who only ever starred in this. So.
Yeah. But he looked a little like Alan Tudyk, at least when you only get a glance. I'm sure if I saw his face properly, I wouldn't think that. But
I mean, I'll take your word for it. I don't think I really looked at his face at all. So
yeah. So no, that's Insomnia. So we got 2 more Nolan films left. We've got The Prestige up next. Obviously, as we mentioned before, skipping over Batman because I've done them all with Connor already. Skipping over the science fiction ones because we've done those on the Ace. I'll probably do a playlist on the movie channel though of all the Christopher Nolan reviews as one separate playlist.
That makes sense.
Just because they're probably all worth looking at in various forms. But yeah, so we'll see you next week for The Prestige, which I know David has been chomping at the bit to get to.
It's a good movie.
Yeah, well,
I've watched that at least 5 times over the past decade.
Okay, well, we'll get to it next week and we'll dive in. You can, of course, get bonus content and support the show by over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. And every month at the $3 tier and up, you get a bonus episode that will loosely tie into whatever the main show is doing. So, yeah. Because we're doing Prestige next week, the bonus movie ended up being The Illusionist, which is a movie that came out the same year about a magician, which I barely remember, if I'm honest. We've not recorded that one yet, but you know, it may already be up, though, by the time this goes out. So we've got that. Obviously, every month as well, we have a show at the $5 tier and up called Extra Reels, which is a so bad, bottom of the barrel, trash movie that might be great, but might not always be great. And the one that is out this month was one of the most painful movie watching experiences that I think we've ever had. So
I'm still recovering, man. I'm not ever going to be able to check into a motel again.
And then, of course, we also have the monthly show, Collector's Cut The Collection, which is our Criterion show, where I mentioned earlier we did 12 Angry Men for this month, so we do a movie on that every month. That's not a Patreon-only show, but you do get it early, like the main show on there. And then, of course, check out Screams After Midnight, the horror movie show that I do with Tim, and the Atomic Cinema Experiment that I do with Tara, which is the science fiction movie show. There's tons of stuff. There's tons of movies being talked about all the time. So, big back catalogue of all these things. Which if
you started watching all the shows now, you might wrap up some point in 2027.
Which, that's the thing is that, we always recommend the newest bonus episode, but I think it must be about 10 or something now.
Yeah.
Total.
Give or take.
Yeah. There's like 50 Ace bonus episodes. There's like 40 Screams After Midnight bonus episodes. The back catalogue of bonus content is piling up. So go check it out if you want to and support the show. You can also support us for free by liking, subscribing, commenting below, sharing us on Twitter, all that good stuff. But anything is appreciated. So thank you once again. We always appreciate it. Keep watching movies, guys. And Ms. David, you're about as mysterious to me as a fucking block toilet is to a plumber.
Thank you.